Hello, I'm Christine Zips, health rights advocate and founder of Zips Media and Wired Schools. Today I have the honor to have three special guests with us, and I'd like to introduce them one at a time here. Patrick Wood has joined me, been on our stage before, so wonderful to welcome him back, as well as James Roguski, who I think has been on our stage more often. But anyway, welcome to you all. And Patrick Wood is editor-in-chief of technocracynews.com and executive director of Citizens for freespeech.org. By the way, we'll have links in the show notes below that you can easily refer to on different topics that we talk about today. And Patrick Wood is a leading and critical expert on sustainable development, green economy, Agenda 21, 2030 Agenda, and historic technocracy. He's the author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, and co-author of Trilaterals over Washington with the late Anthony C. Sutton. Wood remains a leading expert on the elitist Trilateral Commission, their policies and achievements in creating their self-proclaimed new international economic order, which is the essence of sustainable development on a global scale. Karen Bracken is the founder of Tennessee Against Common Core and co-founder of Child Abuse in the Classroom. She also headed up a national group to fight against UN Agenda 21 at the local level. She was instrumental in stopping 2 regional plans in Tennessee. She's a lobbyist, activist, and her passions are children, education, and fighting everything associated with UN Agenda 21. Karen also served as a county commissioner for 4 years. And last but not least, James Roguski. He's an author, researcher, activist, and natural health advocate. He specializes in researching highly complex issues and translating data into simple language that's easily understood to facilitate action. So again, welcome all.
Good to be with you.
So, Pat, if we could start with you, I would like to ask you, since our focus today is on H.R. 7806, known as the American Sovereignty Restoration Act of 2022, its main sponsor, Representative Gary Rogers of Alabama, has stated, the United Nations has repeatedly shown itself as an utterly useless organization. Pat, do you agree? And if so, do you see this bill being instrumental in correcting things?
Well, I do agree. I have to say there have been calls for 50 years to get us out of the United Nations. You might remember, if you're familiar with the John Birch Society, for instance, they've been saying it since, the beginning, that the United Nations is an enemy of our country and that they're completely antithetic to democracy, to constitutional republic, et cetera. And those calls were all met with, just nothing burger, and people just could not get excited about it. The reason that I'm making a deal out of this particular bill at this stage, and it has been, by the way, the same bill has been introduced for several years, and it went nowhere. Oh, but thanks to COVID, thanks to people finally starting to see through the propaganda machine that has convinced everybody to worship, the World Health Organization. There are a lot of people in America now are kind of awake to that. This is the first time that I can remember in modern history where there is enough public angst against the World Health Organization that might carry over into the United Nations in general. And you remember the call to action we set out from Citizens for Free Speech didn't really mention the UN in general. It mentioned the World Health Organization, which is Section 9 of the bill, or Item 9, whatever you call it. And the other, I think there's a total of 12 items or something in there. It all has to do with pulling out of the United Nations and just basically kicking them out into the Atlantic Ocean. They can go pay rent somewhere else, as far as I'm concerned. But the World Health Organization right now is a hot button. And I want to raise awareness on this issue to Americans, and especially to our membership of Citizens for Free Speech. They have been the source greatest source of propaganda and censorship in our country. They're absolutely, at this point, they're absolutely to be declared enemies of the state. And we can't tolerate that. We cannot tolerate enemies from within our country. From without our country, that's another issue. But these are within our country. They're headquartered in New York City. They interact with all of our politicians, all of our, cities and counties and states around our country, and they spread nothing but poison. It would be like, if you can imagine this, it would be like inviting a cartel member, a big mucky muck cartel guy from Mexico or Colombia to come up and establish, a nice headquarters here in, say, New Mexico or wherever. Oh, come on up. It's great here. You buy some here. We even give you 20 acres, build yourself a compound, have TV, have whatever you want to do. Come up here and you just have a good time in our country. We'd never do that. Not in 1,000 years. But we've tolerated this organization, the United Nations in general, for all these years. And they've done nothing but destroy America. And fortunately, I said, COVID has got this silver lining. COVID has woken enough people up that the World Health Organization is not what they say they are, and that they need to be dealt with and held accountable for all the carnage and the damage they've caused to our nation. So is there a chance that this is going to get passed this year? No, there isn't. It's not, no way. But that's not my point. The point is right now to raise awareness because, and by the way, I hate politics. I don't know about you. I just hate the whole system. I hate to even think about it. But if there is a groundswell away from leftist wokeism this fall in the midterm elections, likely there will be a big turnover in 2024 as well. There might be enough momentum by that time, if we keep pushing on this, to where we will get our legislators behind it to finally get the job done and get rid of them. But this is a classic case of where the people need to rise up and stand behind the politicians on this issue and demand resolution. And again, I just don't like politics. The whole system just is detestable and uncomfortable and painful for the most part. But so many things have happened in America over the last 50 years where legislators, where there have been actually good legislators, submit legislation that would have been very good and protective of the United States, where nobody came to the side and said, hey, we agree with that. We think that you should do that. Nobody leaned on the rest of their colleagues and says, support this guy. We agree with him. We want you to go that way. They've just been missing in action. And this is civic responsibility that has been completely ignored in the past. And we just need to stop this. When good legislation comes up, we need to get behind it and encourage those people to be brave and to stand with it, not compromise, not water down and whatever. So this is just one simple bill. It's a very simple bill. It's just basically one page, maybe 1.5 pages, that just says, get the heck out of the United Nations and get them out of our hair once and for all. And, even if we don't accomplish this, even within a 5-year time frame, the more Americans that wake up to the fact of what's going on, the more Americans will be able to take care of themselves and dodge the bullet. And, I know as you're involved in health issues, there's only one person that can and should be in charge of your health, and that's you. Nobody else has responsibility for you but you. Throughout America, we need to turn this table completely upside down. They have no responsibility for our health. We don't want them to have responsibility for our health. Would we listen to somebody that's an expert? Sure. I would. I'd listen to any medical researcher that's got something to say, but it's still my decision what I'm going to stick in my body and how I'm going to live my life. It's none of their dang business. But they want it to be. They want to take complete control over our health, our life, our society, how we eat, how we think. no, you're not going to meddle. It's time to stop meddling with America. Leave us alone. Just leave us alone. We got along just fine without them before. We can do it again, and we just don't need this kind of garbage in our country anymore. Anyway, that's my rant.
Thank you, Pat. I couldn't agree more on all of those points. And recently, I did a series with James Roguski, and he has quite a powerful project going. It's not quite totally published yet, but it's Declaration of Demands. And he talks about who. He's been very instrumental on raising awareness about what they've been into. But I would like to ask you, Pat, what I've asked James, is basically how did we not notice that the WHO, the UN, that they were bullying their way into taking over and having all these things be upside down? Why are we just now, it seems like we're just now saying, wait a minute, you guys shouldn't be doing this, stop,
Yeah. The coup d'etat for technocracy started, in my opinion, in January 2020, on January 29th, when the World Health Organization announced a health emergency or whatever, that the pandemic was coming. That was in my opinion, that was a declaration of war on humanity. This had been brewing for a long time. You never heard, even though they were there, you never heard of Bill Gates being the largest contributor to support the World Health Organization. We never heard that before 2020. Maybe a few people knew about it, but you never heard it generally. We never knew the connections between the CDC, the NIH, and the WHO, and China and Wuhan and all the labs in Ukraine, for instance. There was no general awareness of this. They were just slipping around, slithering around like a bunch of snakes in the den, doing their thing. And all of a sudden now, since COVID hit, people are, of course, investigative journalism is dead. We know that. But people are not that stupid, some of them at least, are not that stupid where they can't look at all this and figure out what's going on and start putting dots together. I'm thinking of people like the Canadian video journalist, Amazing Polly. She's looked at this stuff. Now, she's not a rocket scientist. She's not a professor at University of Toronto or something. She's just a gal that started looking at this stuff, and she started pulling documents together from their documents, by the way, not nothing she created. And she started connecting dots. Well, this guy and that guy, and here they are on this board. Oh, they're over here on this board too. Isn't that curious? And all of a sudden, these connections start coming out. So we've learned an incredible amount of information in the last 2 years about our enemy, about the people who are attacking the world. And this is a war against humanity right now. It's not just us. We need to get over in America, we need to get over our kind of egotistical, like, well, we're the only ones in the world sort of thing, that count. No, this is a global issue. It's a global war against humanity. And we happen to be in the crosshairs because we're still at the pinnacle of freedom and liberty in the world. And people view us that way. I'm ashamed. I'm absolutely ashamed and stunned at what's going on today, especially with the FBI's behavior recently. And it's like you shake your head and you go, what? What is this? Is this a news story that was just made up and somebody was an actor at a studio kind of did this?
Right?
It's like, oh my gosh, where has America gone? Where is America going? We're not communist Cuba, where some things like what are happening today happen in these other communist countries. This is not supposed to happen in America. But
Yes.
all these things have started to come to light, and millions of people now are more awake than they were. Now, do they understand all the details on technocracy, for instance, who's behind us? I don't think they do. But that will come. Many people are falling out now of the mist, if you will, and they're starting to really, really, really get the picture. But it doesn't matter that everybody understand everything to mount a resistance. And I expect a lot of people will never understand everything, but they do know there's pain in their life, and they see the perpetrator of the pain in their life, and they're willing to stand up and take action on it. That's really right now, that's what counts. That's what we need to capitalize on.
Absolutely, and I don't want to take up all the time with you, but I did want to say that your mention of Amazing Polly. Uh, Karen has a wonderful newsletter, and she has cited her articles quite often, and I'm a big admirer of hers. But Pat, since you have the Citizens for Free Speech and deal with censorship, and more people are speaking out. And I understand that it can take up to 7 times for someone to hear the same piece of information before it starts registering. I've heard that before. I wonder if there could be something to that. Maybe I should look into it. And I don't want to believe it, and I'm hoping that I'll find no good reason not to, but maybe I should pay attention. So, that could be that we have that to contend with as
Yeah.
well, but more and more people are speaking out. So, yeah.
Yes, yes, this is a good thing, and I expect it's going to continue. There's lots of other people. I shouldn't just pick on Amazing Polly. There's lots of, and she's pretty young too, I might add.
She is.
I speak from experience. I remember young.
I know she's almost as
you
old
know,
as I am.
that's right. So, there's other young people that have come out that are really hitting the ball solidly. People like a James Corbett, like Whitney Webb, like Derek Bros, like his name Jeremy. I can't remember Jeremy's name from South Africa, but he's a young guy that just swinging the heck out of the bat. And it's a wonderful thing to see for the first time in decades that young people are engaging in this too. The younger generation are engaging in this, and it's about time. And that's one thing that really gives me hope is when I speak to an audience, which 5 years ago mostly would be graying, if not gray hair. Now I look at the audience and I see half of them don't have gray hair anymore. That's anecdotal, I realize, but it speaks to me. Young people are waking up, and this is the greatest hope that I think we have right now, that we can actually do something in the next few years to put these people back where they belong. But even if we lose in the end, it won't be because some of us were cowards and shrunk away from the call. A good fireman and a good policeman, for that matter, they run towards trouble. A fireman runs towards the fire. A policeman is supposed to run towards, conflict. This, of course, isn't the case in many cases these days, especially in the recent school shootings. Tragic. Police are just a bunch of weasels. They ran the other way. It's just, what? One guy with a gun, and they couldn't go take him out? There was 20 of them with machine guns and everything. They couldn't take this one guy out?
In the
You cowards,
Uvalde.
just run in and tackle him. 5 of you run in and tackle him. There's no way he could get away with this. But patriots need to learn. This is a lesson they need to learn. Patriots should run to trouble right now. They should run to the battle, not go home and turn the TV on and watch Fox News or whatever they watch. They should be running to the battle right now and engaging themselves. This is the only way we're going to get out of this. And this requires a mindset across the country, a change in mindset. I'm not going to sit home and do nothing anymore. When I see trouble, I'm going to run to it, and I'm going to deal with it. And I'll tell you what, if 50 million people in our country did that, we would not be where we are right now. We wouldn't. That's a challenge.
Absolutely. Karen, Jim, feel free to jump in while we have Pat with us today, if you'd like.
I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, don't be shy.
I can agree with what Pat's saying. I've been lecturing on Agenda 21 for about 20 years and other subjects. And the reason I got into education was because I knew that they were going to use education to bring sustainable development and Agenda 21 and all of that into the education system. But I always looked at myself as a seed planter. Like I really wasn't out to force my opinions on people or change minds. I felt that my job was to plant seeds so that when someone experienced something in their life, they would say, whoa, wait a minute. I remember Karen Bracken or Pat Wood or Henry Lamb, telling us about this. If we would have never planted those seeds, the people would have never been able to recognize the trouble when they saw it. I was lucky enough, I live in Tennessee, and I was lucky enough to be mentored by the godfather of Agenda 21, Henry Lamb, who has since left this earth. But, I just wanted to say, I have people call me and say, when you told me about this many years ago, I thought you were crazy, but this just happened the other day, or I just saw this. And if it wasn't for you telling me about this, I would have never recognized it. So.
Yeah. By the way, I want to say something, Karen. This is probably we shouldn't do it on the air right now, but I do want to say it anyway. I'm in process of writing an article for a publication that will revisit the heroes of our movement, and that includes Henry Lamb. And I worked for years with Michael Shaw and Joanne Shaw, by the way, I think you know that, and actually going to spend this next Saturday with Michael. It's his birthday. But the bad news about the Shaws and freedom advocates and all the work they did with the Henry Lambs and with the Tom DeWeeses of the world. Joanne passed away recently, and she had cancer, and it finally got her. And it was very sad, very shocking. But Joanne Shaw was one of the unsung heroes of our movement. She stood behind Michael and people like Michael and even Henry Lamb and Mike Kaufman and people like that. She was a strategist extraordinaire that quietly stood behind and advised and encouraged and whatever. So I've been kind of moved to write an article about the heroes of our movement, if you will, the freedom movement that has to do with Agenda 21, all that kind of stuff. If you would be so kind as to maybe write up a couple of paragraphs for me that I could, look at just your knowledge of Henry Lamb and stuff, I would really appreciate it. Do it and send it to me. You've got my email address.
Yes, he wrote legislation against Agenda 21 that we tried to get passed in Tennessee. I had gotten sponsors for it. It did get passed in Alabama, which is, my knowledge, the only state that has actually passed legislation against Agenda 21. And but yeah, he was a great guy. And Michael Kaufman, just another one. He was just wonderful. Rosa Corey.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Rosa's gone too. So anyway, that's an aside. I'm not ready to let these people off the hook. I'll tell you what, we've had them pegged for decades. They're criminals. Sorry, I don't no other way to put it. This is not just, I disagree with them politically. No, these people are criminals because they mean us harm. And they're causing intentional harm to us. This is the definition of a criminal. That's what the criminals do. If it were not for the Henry Lambs of the world, we would not be sitting here today.
That's right.
He was one of the very first that ever blew the whistle on this nonsense and started the discussion. And here we're still discussing it. It's wonderful.
Definitely. I'm glad you're doing that. The late Dr. Michael Kaufman and Rosa Corey, I have her book Behind the Green Mask, and I started with probably 15 years ago along this path with exploring Agenda 21. And even when we first heard about this pandemic, late December, early January, I mentioned to my husband, I said, I would lay big money that this is a Trojan horse connected with the agenda to distract us from them moving forward with their goals. But didn't have any idea at the time, but it's definitely looking more like that now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed.
James, would you like to jump in here?
I recognize that Patrick is limited with time, so I'd like to use my moment now to ask him a question that is curious to me. There's a difference between trying to move the Overton window and see a better future where the UN and the WHO, they're all gone, okay? Most people are like, what are you talking about? They're going to be here forever. And that seems crazy until it happens, at some point in the future. the WHO's network is like an octopus or a hydra, and it's just everywhere. And I've read their rough draft of their proposed pandemic treaty. And what I saw between the lines, and this is the question that I would like to ask you, there's a difference between long-term goal and the strategic plan that you have to accomplish that long-term goal versus the reactionary nature of people dealing what's in their face. And so the tentacles from the UN and the WHO, we got a package delivered, but it didn't come to the home. It went to a package pickup center. And the email that we received had a note in the bottom of it about wearing a mask and all that sort of stuff. And it was quoting the WHO. Okay. So they're already, their tentacles have come all the way into my package pickup email notification. Okay. And that's, the repeat and the repeat. And so what we're dealing with is people dealing with their local school board, their local city council, their government, their county, their state, their country. And the problem is you have to kill the, heart of the beast. Otherwise, it's like whack-a-mole. You got a problem here. One of their tentacles is doing this and one of their tentacles is doing that. And you keep fighting the tentacles. But, if 7806 were to pass, all of the tentacles to the United States would just fall away. So if you could talk to your vision of the bigger picture, the goal, not just how to fight the little, big battles for each individual person, but, the big picture versus what everybody's dealing with day to day.
There's an old adage that says a fish stinks from the head down. And this is true, I think, especially true with the World Health Organization and all the people surrounding it. They have sunk their tentacles or, slithered them in all over the world. And there's no doubt that they've had an army of followers that have bought drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And they do anything that the World Health Organization says. Attacking the World Health Organization at this point is wholly appropriate, even if we don't totally win at this point, to raise general awareness that their tentacles should be ignored, that their edicts and their threats and their panics and everything else are just a nothing burger to be ignored, that they are irrelevant to us. We may or may not actually be able to defund and destroy the World Health Organization. I kind of doubt it in a way, because if we get rid of them, they're going to go somewhere else. They'll go to Germany or they go to Brazil or somewhere. They'll find a place to have their headquarters. In fact, they got headquarters all over the world right now, different places. But we may not get rid of them as an organization on a global basis. But as far as America is concerned, all the people downline that are participating with World Health propaganda, all the doctors, all the health and medical experts, all of the politicians. And, I would, by extension, I would also include the CDC and the NIH, et cetera, with the World Health Organization, because they're all operating obviously together, in my opinion. Once we attack that monster, the head of it, the more people realize that, we don't need to listen to those people. We could just ignore them, basically, just tell them, no, go away. But, until people on the street stand up, like, this little thing, you got this thing in the mail. If people on the street, when they stand up and say to other people on the street, this is nonsense and I'm not putting up with it anymore, period. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to listen to it. They're irrelevant. They're criminals. They're mean-spirited. They're trying to cheat the pants off of us and wreck our health, et cetera, whatever. And we're just not going to listen to them anymore. That message needs to be sent up from the bottom of the food chain to the people above us, to all the city officials, the county officials, the state officials, and ultimately perhaps even the federal officials. People just need to stop participating. And otherwise, I don't know any other way at this point to approach it, but I think this is the right way for us where we are right now. And this is true on so many other issues as well. The stuff that the FBI is doing right now is probably another thing we could dig into. We don't want to, but there's so many issues like this in society right now where we need to just say, you know what, my head is screwed on okay. It has been screwed on okay. It is screwed on okay now. And I don't need somebody from any other organization to come in and tell me I don't see things clearly or I'm just screwed up. I'm sorry. You know, you want to say, go suck an egg. I'm just, my brain is just fine. And even if it's messed up, it's my brain and I'll do what I want to do with it. And you're not going to come in and jack my brain around. And I think more and more people are fed up with that. They feel the manipulation. They feel the clamp, you know, being put on them. And they're like, no, I quit telling me what to do. I don't want you to tell me what to do. And I don't like what you're telling me to do anyway. But in the end of it, non-compliance is going to be the biggest weapon we have. Not much of an answer, maybe, but I think that's it.
I think it's a great one. I've always been saying until we can stand up and say no, say no. You know, won't do it, won't wear it,
Yeah.
won't put out.
You know, it's interesting. I need to just mention that you remember all of the United Nations stuff with Agenda 21 came into America on a voluntary basis. Voluntary. They stress this all over the place. When Italy went around and converted 600 odd cities in America to go along with sustainable development and put all these policies in place and stuff, is always all voluntary. We didn't force anybody to do anything. There was no national legislation, blah, blah, blah. It was all voluntary. You didn't have to do it. And I hate to say this, but by and large, they were right. It was voluntary. We had every opportunity to say, get the heck out of my city. We had that opportunity, didn't take it. We could have. We didn't take it. Now we're back to the same proposition on a larger scale. It was all voluntary with them coming in, but now that they got the teeth in, it's, oh, you can't get rid of us now. Well, if it was voluntary to bring you in here in the first place, I can voluntarily kick your butt out. You can't say anything about it. Sorry, guys. Bye.
Anyone who's ever gardened knows that it's a lot easier to pull a weed out as soon as it sprouts.
Yeah.
But once the roots get in, what most everyone appears to be doing is trimming the hedge, okay?
Yes.
Fighting against the little twigs and the leaves, you know, at the far distant branches of this monster. And, you know, 7806 digs it out by the root and throws the whole thing away.
Yes.
You know, the gardening analogy, I think, is very
Yes.
apropos. It's an endless battle against all of the little
Yeah.
forces that are in alignment with the core problem, which is, you know, one world government versus local decision making.
Yeah, exactly. We need, by extension, first, we need to take responsibility for ourselves and our own health and our own life. Whatever our life is, we need to take responsibility for it. Quit being victims or anything else, pawns. Secondly, we need to take control. Be responsible for our own communities. That's the next logical extension. If you're going to take responsibility for yourself, why doesn't your community take responsibility for itself? And then expand that concept onwards. You know, I think that's how America was built in the first place.
Definitely. And Pat, I wanted to ask you, it's my understanding, again, through Rosa Corey, if I'm recalling it correctly, she speaks a lot, as you know, about ICLEI and all of their
Yes.
all of their meetings and what they do and how they set everything up to make you think you have a voice in the public meeting when you actually don't. They're ganging up on you there. But with the presence in our local governments of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and PPPs, public-private partnerships, are they not associated with the UN? Is that not unconstitutional, as we're not supposed to do business with a foreign entity?
Totally.
Yeah.
And again, it was just voluntary. I mean, you know, they came in and did it, and nobody protested. But absolutely, public-private partnerships was an express policy that came out of the United Nations. It didn't exist before. The UN invented it and then went out and said, well, here's how you're going to fund your environmental wacko projects. You're going to do it through PPPs. Get the governments to compromise, take money from public entities, to get favors and other benefits and whatever out of partnering with the city, and then all of a sudden you got this stuff embedded. There's so many schemes like this that have come in that are unconstitutional. The whole concept of regionalization right now exists with the idea of councils of governments, for instance. That all is straight out of the United Nations. We could throw it out at any time, but now they're embedded. Councils of governments are embedded. That all but 2 states they're blanketed by these regional governance organizations that usurp sovereignty from all the cities and counties that live within that what they've declared to be a jurisdiction. But regional governance is not an American concept at all. Has nothing to do with constitutional republic. Nothing to do with it. If anything, it's more akin to a Soviet, that they called a Soviet in Russia, where you had regional governments. They told everybody what to do. So, we've been riddled with this stuff. It's time to say no. The more we can damage and strike at the heart of the United Nations, the more people are going to wake up and say, no, let's examine this stuff. Let's examine this. Why are we hurting? Where did all the pain come from? Oh, it's the United Nations that brought that in. Yeah. Were you suffering from a public-private partnership because the private partner screwed your city up and now is disappeared and left you with a bag and the debt? Oh, you think that's a problem? That's United Nations. Thank you very much. What do you think? You like the United Nations now? Want more of them? How about some more public-private partnership? We got another one right over here wants to come in and do something with your city. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I need to go. I wish I could talk with you guys longer, but I got another meeting I just got to get to. But this is such an important discussion. Absolutely critical.
Yeah, and you let us know from the beginning your time constraints. So we thank you very much for joining us. Does anybody have a last minute, or do you have a last minute comment before we let him get back to his life?
When you edit the video, could you have your editors put my face over his mouth, because I'll just parrot everything he says. I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
There's an app for that.
He'll have 4 heads. How about that? And maybe snakes coming out. No.
No, I obviously I hear you. I agree, and we're all on the same path, headed in the same direction. There will be a point in the future where the window shifts and everybody goes, oh, of course we got to get rid of them, and it's just a lot of work from then until now. And here we are getting started. Many people have come before us. We're certainly not first, but a lot of work to do, and I'm glad that you're with us.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Karen, I look forward to hearing from you.
Absolutely. Karen, there you go.
I was muted. The only thing I'd like to say to add to Patrick's commentary is that just because you live in a red state, don't think you don't have this going on in your backyard.
You mean Arizona?
I live in Tennessee, and I worked with Henry Lamb on ICLEI Free in Tennessee. Chattanooga was one of the beta sites for Agenda 21. And the Education for Sustainable Development Toolkit was developed right here at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, by a UNESCO secretariat who got a grant from the United States government to build this toolkit that basically said, in order to achieve a sustainable development, we have to dumb down our children.
Yeah. Yep. Incredible.
Definitely. Pat,
well, fairly well. Continue the discussion, please.
We will. We will, and we'll share with you a link so you'll make sure we're not talking about you too much. But thank you so much for all you are and do. You're such a personal hero, and thank you for your work in this.
My pleasure. We're all in it together, folks. Yeah. we got to battle arm to arm, face to face, arm to arm, whatever, until this is done. Period.
Absolutely.
Yep. So have a good one. We'll talk again, I'm sure.
Take care. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
All right. So I'm going to, Karen and Jim, I don't know if you saw my chat messages, but I was noticing that, I've got this on speaker view, and I was noticing when Pat was all big that other of us were popping in unless we were muted. I'm not sure what was causing that, but I wanted to explain about that. But please feel free to unmute yourselves now. We're still recording, and I'd love to have a little wrap up session, and Jim, for you to talk about your declarations of demands, and Karen with your project that you have coming up to help
Well,
further this HR bill.
I absolutely know what I want to talk about, and that's what Karen wants to talk about,
Oh,
because I'm excited to be supporting her in her vision, which I think is in alignment with everything Pat said. And I know Karen's been working really hard up late, so um, it's nice to have great ideas, but what's needed is organization and planning and building a team and having an idea of not just where you want to be, but how you're going to get there. And so I know Karen's been very busy, and I want to hear as much as anybody else what she's up to.
definitely. Well, you two have the floor. I'm going to be quiet.
Well, I've spent the last couple days just making phone calls and contacting people from when I had the National Agenda 21 group, my Tennessee Against Common Core group, which, although it was a Tennessee group, I worked with education activists all over the country, contacting groups, just looking to see, hey, if we do this, can you put your group support behind us? So I wanted to know that at least starting out of the gate, we'd have some support that we could grow on. So I've been doing that. I've gotten, I think, very positive responses. Putting an action plan together, keeping it simple to start, because we all know that, if you overwhelm people with tasks that are hard to achieve, you're going to lose your people. So you got to, right. And to understand that this is for the long haul, like Pat said, we're not going to fix this in a year. So I don't want to start out, gangbusters and scare people away. So we start out slow. We start out with building the organization, which is really the biggest of my goals right now, is just building the organization and getting a lot of people signed on to what we're doing. And it's all around HR 7806, because if we can take down the UN, we take down the WHO as well. So I think we need to stop fighting the tentacles and go right for the head. So.
Very good. Does your project have a name at this point, Karen?
Well, I just started a Substack, and it's called Withdraw UN altogether .substack.com.
That link will be below in the show notes, right?
Yes, and it is a site that you can register on now. All the information will be coming soon, but I want to try and get as many people registered as possible. And again, build the organization, get the support, and we'll be putting out information and action items very soon.
Wonderful. I'm going to sign up today for sure. And just to offer to you, if I can be of any assistance when you're ready to launch, if you'd like to put together a little platform here to announce it, I'd be happy to help with that.
Yeah, I have a lot of organizations, John Birch Society, the American Policy Center, that have said they would, Leo Homan, that they would run articles and help me get the word out.
Excellent. Good, good.
From my perspective, I've seen graphics of the extent of the United Nations list of sub organizations and connections and things. There are many people who have delved deeply into all of these many just it's ungodly how big the octopus is. But for the most part, if you ask the general population, they really wouldn't have any idea that all of these things are connected, all of these different organizations. And so the awareness that people have they probably don't even really know that the World Health Organization is connected to the UN, however tenuously that connection really is, and private organization and international organization. They see things on the news, and they get things. Like I got another document in the mail that literally said injections can prevent you from transmitting and giving this ailment to the next person. And you just go, that's a lie. Okay. But, see the WHO's information. So whether they see Tedros Ghebreyesus saying something on TV or in a news article or whatever it is, that is actually something that a decent percentage of the population is aware of. And so I'm very much focused on using that somewhat familiarity to communicate with people who have no idea how big of a monster the UN is. They kind of have a feeling that the World Health Organization is connected directly to the problems that they've been having for the past couple of years. And so I'm about to go on a rampage of sharing information about what the WHO is planning. And I'll give the really briefest summary. They have two tracks. So if you could envision two parallel railroad tracks going off into the distance around the bend, I've read their documents, so I know where they're headed. I know what's around the bend. And one of those is what they call the Pandemic Treaty. And one of those are amendments to international health regulations, which we defeated in May. But, it's like a hydra. You cut the head off, it keeps coming right back. And so in the next couple of months, I'll put it this way. Here's the news announcement for everyone who, there's no way you get this from your mainstream news. The WHO, along these two parallel paths, have clearly directed all of the member nations, 194 nations, to submit their individual nations' proposals to put on the train that's going down both of these tracks. If a nation wants to submit proposals for amendments to international regulations, they have to do that before September 30th. If a member nation wants to submit proposals for the pandemic treaty, that's September 15th. They're going to have a public comment period on this September 29th and 30th, which quite frankly, it's bogus, but it's an organizing moment where, by all means, we will submit what we think about what they're doing. Here's the question, people. Does anybody listening know who their delegates are, who are giving away your nation's sovereignty as we speak? Okay, so I'm going to do everything I can to raise the awareness that from right now until September 15th for one train track and September 30th for the other train track, your delegates from your nation, 194 nations, are selling out your country. And they're trying to keep it secret. And I'm going to try to shine as much light on that as I possibly can, because that's the clear and present thing that's happening now. And I recognize, it's just one of the tentacles of the UN, but it's the one that's, trying to wrap around my throat right now. Okay. And so that's the one that I'll be raising awareness of. We did it back in April and May, and we won a skirmish. Okay. There's going to be another skirmish and another skirmish. But, the stuff that Patrick and Karen are talking about, that's the war. And so stay tuned for reports on how the WHO is trying to kill you and trying to take over your sovereignty, both national and personal. There are traitors around the world in each country who are selling out their nation to give more authority and sovereignty to the WHO and thus, the UN. And you're not going to see that on the nightly news.
Jim, thank you for sharing that. And also below, I'll be including a link to your Declaration of Demands site that we're adding a few videos to that should help explain.
Thank you for your help with all of that.
You're
Yes.
very welcome. That's the least I could do. You're welcome. So we will be doing that, and so we'll everybody look for that to be happening with that.
And
So
Christine, just to let people know that, while we're working the United States, the HR 7806 angle, James and I are both involved in groups outside of the United States, and we're trying to make this a global effort. But because the United States is so far ahead of the game, we've got the legislation. That battle has already been won. So we
okay,
have the legislation. So we're hoping that um, when the other nations see that we're making strides in accomplishing this, that they'll jump on board. But we are meeting and talking with delegations from other countries because they're all angry at the UN. They're all angry at the WHO. It's not just the United States. And I think that's different than it's been all the other times. It was always the United States trying to, Ron Paul, get the US out of the UN. But this is going global now.
right. Such a good point. I didn't realize that, Karen. Thank you for explaining that.
I'd like to add another something, and I think it's embedded in, I believe, 13 points of the bill. It's not just get the U.S. out of the UN, it's literally get the UN out of the U.S. Okay,
Right.
like physically their property and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And so, we're basically, the one thing I think I might have added to what Patrick was saying when he was talking about having drug cartel people move to New Mexico. Well, when the cartel of the United Nations moved to New York City, they were given like outlandish diplomatic immunity. Okay. The WHO has a lower grade immunity, but still way too much. And so, they've tried to protect and insulate themselves with, all of this legal protection. And 7806 just, basically rips out the root and says, we're done with the whole thing. It, I understand that the regular average person in the world has things that they're dealing with every day. They got to pay the bills, they got to go to work, they got to deal with mandates and all this craziness. It's just an understanding that those things are coming down from these larger organizations. I refer to Tedros as the dictator general of the World Hypnosis Organization. He has everybody under a spell, and all the government authorities and corporations and people and media. They're like, oh, the WHO has spoken. Well, they're currently able to make recommendations. And if people are hypnotized into thinking that they then have to enact that into legislation on a local basis, unfortunately, yes, that does have to be fought on a local basis, and you have to fight back. But they kill you by 1,000 cuts, right? It's that they're here and they're here and they're here and they're here and they're here. It's actually easier to just go for the heart and the head of where all of this insanity is coming from, and that's what we're focused on.
What a noble goal. And I know you're going to be pushing that ball closer to the goalpost with all of these amazing efforts. You both amaze me so much. I have tremendous respect for what you both are doing, and I can only hope to try to help be your cheerleader along the way. So don't ever hesitate.
And as you well know, I mean, one of my I guess calling cards these days is I want to work with the willing. I'm not trying to proselytize and convert to people who aren't believers. Okay, it's like step number one in any kind of organization is to find the people who agree with you. We got to connect with Patrick today. It's beautiful. So my phone number, write it down, is 310-619-3055. And the whole point is you can spend all of your time trying to talk to brick walls and get them to see your way. Or you can spend the vast majority of your time connecting with, networking with, organizing with, supporting people. Like I'm fully behind everything Karen's doing. One of the parts of the conversations that I have with most people that call me is, hey, what are you passionate about? How can I help you? Okay. And so give me a phone call, 310-619-3055. And I'm looking for ideas and information and connections. And it is a multi-front, battle because they're everywhere, right? But we're trying to think, also along the big picture. And anyone who shares that thought, step number one is put your team together so that you're not out there alone against a monster. Okay. Bees are really tiny. Okay. But when you see a swarm of bees, most people are like, oh crap, I'm going to get out of here. A beekeeper goes, ooh, great bees. Okay. I want some bees. Come on over here. But it's not going to be just me. It's not going to be just Karen or you or Patrick. It's us bringing people together with a common idea of what we want the future to be.
Definitely, definitely. I have a meme that I'm rather fond of. It says, it's not your duty to awaken everyone. It's your duty to awaken those who weren't aware they were asleep."
Yeah.
And it seems kind of related to what you just said. I totally agree. Great policy right there. So, what do you think? Have we covered this pretty well for today? Any final thoughts before we go?
I would just like everybody to sign up at withdrawun.substack.com and look and see what we have to offer. And if it's not for you, you can easily unsubscribe, but we hope you won't. And to know that, we're fighting to save this country. I have 4 great grandchildren.
No.
And I'm fighting for those babies, and I'm fighting for your babies too. So but it's hard to do it alone. The more people, the easier it gets.
And everybody has my phone number, and I just encourage everyone to go to stopthewho.com, stopthewho.com. We've got a, hashtag stop the who, hashtag defund the who, hashtag leave the who, and hashtag abolish the who. Get onto the train anywhere you want, okay? And then, hashtag abolish the UN as well. And so everyone is coming from a different place with a different culture, different nation, different ideas, different resources, different ideas. I think we're all headed in the same place. We want not centralized control of some bureaucrat telling us what to do. Get out of here. We're in charge of our life. We're the king of our own castles. We make our own decisions. We don't want our delegates to the UN or our delegates to WHO selling away our nations or our personal sovereignty. We need to pay attention that that's exactly what they're doing right now, and they have been for 75 years.
It's called taxation without representation.
Definitely. And I know we're all focused on children, creating a better future, a better world for them. And like I shared with Karen and Jim, that I got into my advocacy work by noticing our grandchildren and saying, I don't want them waking up one day looking around and saying, why didn't my parents and grandparents, how did they let this happen? And once they realize that, how things used to be versus how they are now. Of course, they're growing up in so much of this, they don't necessarily realize that, but they will. And they'll compare and contrast and figure it out. And, we need for them to know. I'm even writing a virtual reality book where for a legacy for them, where they will know that I'm addressing all of these issues, and kind of in a Nancy Drew fashion, but they'll get it through that as well. But, that's why we're doing it, for the children.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much. We just appreciate this very much and look forward to getting this information out there for everyone. So I guess we'll say thank you, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.